With the arrival of Vijaya, a prince of Indian origin at Kammaltota on the northwest coast, purely by accident, it is said that the written record of the dynasty of Singhalese kings began. This place, where the seat of royalty was established later, came to be known as Thambapanni. The seat of royalty moved from here to Anuradhapura and continued for many centuries there. Anuradhapura, a city with a proud history, the capital of most of Lanka's kings, founded by Pandukabhaya. It moved to Sigiriya for a brief period during the reign of Kashyapa, the Easthat warrior king. After nearly a century of civil strife brought about by foreign invasions, Polonnaruwa became the capital of a unified island. Polonnaruwa is also a place where magnificent creations of architecture, sculpture and art are found within its precincts. Parakrama Samudra, built by Parakrama Bahu I by combining 3 smaller tanks, is an example of the ingenuity of the irrigation engineers of the time. The Polonnaruwa period represents a time when the kingdom exercised influence over foreign territories at the political level and at economic and social levels. A time of prosperity built on a sound economy based on an agroeconomy underpinned by a well-established network of irrigation and profitable foreign trade. The summer palace, built on a small island in the Samudra, is an architecturally excellent creation. This is quite different from the summer palace at the Ranmasu Uyana in Anuradhapura. As recorded in the Chula Vansa, in a small area of land, there was a 3-storied building. Today, in the stretch of land covered with scrub jungle, only the remnants of walls 4 feet in height can be seen. According to architects, this is similar to Vijayotpaya in shape. There would have been openings all round it to let in the cool air from the turbulent surface of the reservoir. At one end of the Parakrama Samudra, in another island, close to the Bund, archaeologists have discovered the remnants of another building. Only a few stone pillars remain of this other building, which is said to have been built by King Nishankamalla. Although today it is covered by jungle, in its heyday in the 11th century, it would have been a magnificent structure surrounded by water on all sides. A short distance away from the island, on the mainland, are found the ruins of the audience hall of King Nishankamalla, who reigned in 1186. Massive pillars erected to support the roof had also been used for another purpose. Each stone pillar records the person who sat close to it or against it. These records give a fair idea of the plan of a royal court at Polonnaruwa. The most striking feature of Nishankamalla's audience hall is the throne made of granite. Perhaps he had his throne on the colossal figure of a lion of stone to proclaim his greatness. The stone throne with fine carvings is one of the oldest of thrones found in the island. Below it is recorded that the king sat on this lion throne with his ministers, officials, and other courtiers in attendance. King Nishankamalla, seated on this throne and enjoying the soft, cool breeze wafting across the Parakrama Samudra, must have been immensely pleased with himself. The palace that was behind the audience hall could be identified today by its foundation only. Although it did not look large, it must have consisted of at least 2 stories. The stone steps leading to the upper story can be seen even today. Between the audience hall and the palace is an inscription setting out Nishankamalla's achievements. There are ruins of a 2-storied building to the southwest of the palace. What is special about this building is that some of the linear ornamentation and the motifs and colored plastering typical of Polonnaruwa are well preserved to this day. Though the royal bath, which was part of Nishankamalla's palace complex, cannot be seen today, a beautiful pond made of stone can be seen. The water taken from the Parakrama Samudra through pipes may have been made to cascade into it. Archaeologists as well as historians point out that in the city of Polonnaruwa, 2 inner cities were constructed. Within one was the palace complex. In the other was the tooth relic complex. Although the tradition was to construct the tooth relic complex close to the royal palace, at Polonnaruwa there has been an apparent departure from these traditions. In the fortified compound complex of the tooth relic, it is significant that 3 palaces for the tooth relic, built at different times, have been found. The palace of the tooth relic, which is known as the Hatter Dhaage, can be seen when entering from the northern entrance southwards. Most people believe that it is so named either because it was constructed within 60 days or because it contained 60 relics. The Hatter Dhaage, which is an image chamber, is of the style of the Gandakuti and is built entirely of stone. Large slabs of stone have been used in the construction, and many decorative carvings too can be seen. Hatter Dhaage, in the opinion of archaeologists, was also an image chamber. The finding of 3 stone images may have influenced this view. On the lower story of the Hatter Dhaage, among the images at the rear portion, the image in the center is identified as that of the Buddha. the eyes of the image are directly focused on the Samadhi statue in the Hatter Dhaage, opposite the Hatter Dhaage. This is an extraordinary creation. It is believed that the tooth relic was placed in the upper story of the Hatter Dhaage. On the wall, built with stone slabs placed next to each other on either side of the approach towards the south, large stone inscriptions are found. A study of these will yield valuable information about the social environment of the time. Among the inscriptions is one setting out the genealogy of King Nishanka Malla and another giving advice and guidance to the bhikkhus. Taking the shape of the main entrance into reckoning, the renowned archaeologist H.C.P. Bell has expressed the view that the structure may have been in the shape of a gopura. It is believed that the Hatter Dhaage in front of the Hatter Dhaage was the palace of the tooth relic, built by Parakrama Bahu I in the 12th century AD. There is enough evidence to show that the circular building had a roof over it. On the four sides were four Buddha statues in the Samadhi posture, made of stone and considered to be aesthetically pleasing creations. Among the monuments at Polonnaruwa, the Hatter Dhaage occupies a very prestigious place. A number of artistic features which are representative of the Polonnaruwa tradition are found in it. The guard stone, the moonstone, and the delicate decorative carvings on the parapet wall all testify to the excellent artistic and creative skills of the Polonnaruwa artists. Polonnaruwa polity begins with Vijayabahu I, who unified the island under his rule and selected Polonnaruwa as his capital. With his coronation, he brought the tooth relic to Polonnaruwa, built the Hatter Dhaage, and placed the tooth relic in it. Professor Senarat Paranavitana says that the lively and expressive carvings at the Palace of the Tooth Relic, designated as the Hatter Dhaage, are some of the finest and rarest examples of the excellence of the creative arts of the Polonnaruwa period. The capital, which was in Anuradhapura for nearly 10 centuries, was moved to Polonnaruwa and was shifted once again in the 13th century. The pressure from internal and external enemies made the kings shift the capital to locations which they thought were safe. In the year 1232, Vijayabahu III is said to have brought the tooth relic, the traditional symbol of sovereignty, to Dambadeniya, where he is said to have built a city with all amenities. 40 years later, King Bhuvanekabahu made Yop Ahora his capital. All these were defendable, strategic locations. Yop Ahora, also known as Subhapabbata and Subhavala, represents a significant period in the evolution of the art of carving and sculpture. The most noteworthy specimen of stone architecture dating from the Dambadeniya period is the gateway at Yop Ahora, which is in Pandyan style and is noteworthy for the frieze of dancers and musicians at the base. The stairway leading to this gateway is reminiscent of similar structures in Cambodia and was perhaps designed by Khmer architects. Perhaps the most striking are the figures of roaring lions on either side of the head of the stairway. Similar figures of lions have not been found elsewhere. Most archaeologists and architects have not been able to identify what the building was used for. It may be because within this are found features of a palace as well as that of a building for the tooth relic. What has made most people identify this as a palace for the tooth relic is the frieze of female dancers and musicians carved on the base. As mentioned earlier, the Yop Ahora stone carvings, sculpture, and some of the architectural features indicate foreign influences. The figure of Gaja Lakshmi and the Vimana feature, typical of Gopura, all suggest Hindu influence. Some are of the opinion that this was the entrance to a king's palace. According to them, the tooth relic, which is the traditional symbol of Singhalese sovereignty, was placed at the summit of the rock. Whatever that be, Yop Ahora too was another proud capital of the island, built during turbulent times. It also displays the creative genius of the architects, sculptors, and other craftsmen who were associated with the striking creations. It was a fortress city, strategically located. On one side was a massive rock, and on the other side, the semicircular inner wall with traditional protective structures. In the inner city are found the remains of many buildings which may have been used for state purposes. On the semicircular inner wall, attached to the rock itself, are two entrances to the city. The moat, which is outside the wall, is fed by a natural water source, according to archaeologists. The site associated with the massive protective rock chosen by Bhuvanekabahu was the capital for well over a decade. It is a special and aesthetically pleasing location, apart from its strategic importance. The seat of government moved from Yop Ahora to Kurunegala, then to Gampola, and subsequently to Kotte in the western province, and finally to the hill country, then known as Kanda Odorata, which, becoming the last seat of government, was the tragic result of a series of unfortunate events. Folklore records that Kanda Odorata was named Senkadagala after the Brahmin Senkada, but it was likely to be so named because it was the rock where the invading armies were annihilated, as the literal meaning of the word suggests. Kanda Odorata was strategically located with natural defenses comprising forests, rocky terrain, and water hazards, making it extremely inaccessible to an invading army. The palace that is seen today is the royal dwelling, or the Vasala, of the last king of the Kanda Odorata. It is clear that some of the buildings that were part of the complex were removed at a later date by the British or modified by them for their use. Visitors to Sri Lanka from time to time have in their records left descriptions of the Mahavasala. In 1762, Ribs left a record of the palace of King Kirti Sri Rajasinghe, a contemporary of his. Boyd in 1782 left a description of the palace of King Rajadi Rajasinghe, while Johann Wolfgang wrote in 1736 about the palace of King Narendra Singhe. The main door and the associated structures have not undergone any change. The 300-year-old wooden doorpost is a fine example of Kandyan craftsmanship. The open hall at the entrance is considered the audience hall of the king, where he met his visitors. These are typically Kandyan in design and execution. Considering the records of Lieutenant Littleman, what is found here has not undergone any restoration. Although the roof is covered with flat tiles, architects believe that the roof may have been modified or repaired, and as such, its shape may have been changed. The hall, where the king and his ministers met for official purposes, was known as the Muggle Module. In the Kandy Palace complex, the Muggle Module is an impressive architectural creation. Although this building is attributed to King Rajadi Rajasinghe, there is evidence to show that it may have been constructed at an earlier date, even before his ascent to the throne. A number of decisive events in the history of this island took place here in the Muggle Module, enhancing its historical importance. 48 wooden pillars embellished with fine carvings can be seen here. The carved crown of the pillars and the carved beams can also be seen. Carvings at the Muggle Module exemplify the fluent creations of the Singhalese wood carving tradition. As is typical of the traditional Kandyan-style roof, its gradient is steep, and the tiles used are the traditional flat tiles typical of the period. For the Muggle Module, which is said to have been a construction of the master architect and builder Devendra, the Halmila timber had been brought from Matale, according to folklore. The two parapet walls above the moat, constructed round the palace, according to architects, symbolically represent the clouds and waves. It was King Sri Vikramaraja Singha who converted the stretch of paddy field known as Lelwala into a beautiful lake. Earlier, it was called the Milky Sea. The small island in the middle of the lake was called the Kundasale. This was also a place of rest for the king. The Queen's Bath, Ulpange, was a two-storied building. It had large ventilator windows. In the center, it is said, there was a pond or well fed with water from the lake. The Temple of the Tooth, where a tooth relic of the Buddha is enshrined. The Temple of the Tooth is one of the most sanctified and venerated places in the island. The tooth relic, which was brought to the island in the 4th century AD, was venerated by a long line of kings and became the supreme symbol of sovereignty, the custodianship of which conferred a right to rule the country. It is still housed in the Temple of the Tooth in Kandy, the last center of government of the Singhalese kings. The first Temple of the Tooth in the Kanda Odorata kingdom was built by King Vimala Dharmasurya I, who was king during the years 1592 to 1603. The two-storied building around it was built by King Narendra Singha. The Hevisi Mandapaya, or the drumming hall, with its stone pillars embellished with carvings, is the lower story of the two-storied building built by King Narendra Singha, enclosing the Temple of the Tooth. The lower story of the Temple of the Tooth, which is known as the Pahatamalaya, is used as an image room. It abounds in paintings and carvings, typical of the Kandian period. In the inner chamber of the Temple of the Tooth is the enshrined tooth relic of the Buddha, which has been there for many centuries. Even today, the most colorful and resplendent festival of the island is the traditional festival of the tooth relic, celebrating the season of Asala, July-August. There is evidence to show that the festival of the tooth was celebrated in the Anuradhapura kingdom too. The tooth relic, which was brought to Sri Lanka during the reign of King Kitsiri Mevan in the 4th century AD, it is said, was carried in procession from the royal Temple of the Tooth to the Abhayagiri monastery. This practice was continued till the 6th century AD. The Chinese traveler monk Fa Hien has left records of the festival of the tooth relic he had witnessed. He mentions that the king, with the participation of the people, celebrated the festival in a grand manner. In later years, there were records to show that the festival was held during the Polonnaruwa period in the reign of King Parakramabahu I. Similarly, during the Dambadeni period, a grand festival had been held in the reign of Pandita Parakramabahu. To this festival procession, it is said, King Kirti Sri Rajasingha added the procession of the tooth relic, and there are records to confirm it. The festival, which ceased to be held after the liberation struggle of the Singhalese people against the British in 1818, was revived by the colonial power after a lapse of 10 years. There is a tunnelway called the Amba Rama, which it is said was constructed so that the drumming within the temple could be heard at the Asgiriya monastery, which was entrusted with the custodianship of the relic. It is a fact that even today, the sounds of the drums are carried far into the distance through the Amba Rama passageway. Through one end of the drumming hall, the Pattirippua, or the octagon, could be entered. It was built by King Sri Rajasinghe and is said to be the creation of the master builder Devendra. From the Pattirippua, a clear view of the city and its environs can be seen. The Pattirippua was used by the king to address the people, and perhaps as a resting place too. 1815 marked the tragic end of the Singhalese royal dynasty. By 1815, the British, who had established their rule over the maritime provinces, which the Dutch held in gross violation of the treaty with the Singhalese king, through intrigue, deception, and with the connivance of an influential section of the treacherous Kandyan aristocracy, took over the administration of the Kandyan kingdom. The king, betrayed by his ministers, was finally captured by the British, thus ending Singhalese sovereignty, which for 2 millennia or more could not be overthrown by any imperial power, Eastern or Western.